One day. That is the gap. That is the whole story. And I want you to hold on to that number before we go anywhere else tonight. On a Sunday in the middle of August, in a house in Scotland, a 77-year-old man was told by his son that the son was moving home, coming back to Britain, bringing the grandchildren, after 6 years away. 3 days later, the rest of the world found out. Not 3 weeks, not 3 months of quiet preparation, of lawyers and press officers and carefully worded statements agreed between two households. 1 day of private knowledge before the machinery started turning, and then it was on every front page in Britain. I am Richard, and this is Richard Valentin. Tonight we are going to walk through exactly what happened between the 17th and the 23rd of August, using only what has actually been reported by named organizations: the Associated Press, the BBC, the Guardian, the Palace itself. And I am going to be honest with you about the places where the reporting stops and the guessing starts, because there is a great deal of guessing about this story right now, and almost none of it is being labeled as guessing. Let us start with why one day matters so much. If you have ever had a difficult conversation with your own family, you already understand something that the royal correspondents keep dancing around. The timing of news inside a family is never accidental. When you tell someone late, you are telling them something. When you tell them early, you are telling them something else. And when you tell your father on a Sunday and the newspapers have it by Wednesday evening, you have made a decision about what kind of relationship you are in. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is exactly the point where a lot of channels start inventing. They will tell you what was said on that phone call. They will give you the exact words. They will describe the king's face. Nobody knows what was said on that call. Nobody. Not the Associated Press, not the BBC, not one royal correspondent in Britain. What we know is the sequence, and the sequence came from a source described as familiar with the couple's plans, speaking to NBC News. So let me give you the sequence, and only the sequence. King Charles was informed on Sunday. On Wednesday evening, the Telegraph and the Sun published the story first. By Thursday morning, it was everywhere. That is it. That is the entire documented spine of this week. Everything else you have read is somebody's interpretation, including mine, and I will tell you when mine starts. Here is why I think that gap is worth an entire program. For 6 years, the story of this family has been a story about announcements. The announcement in January 2020 that they were stepping back, the Oprah interview, the Netflix series, the book. Every single time, the palace learned about it roughly when the public did, or barely before. There is a whole shelf of royal biography built on that grievance, on the idea that the Sussexes go to the media before they go to the family. And now, in August of 2026, we get 1 day. 1 day is more than nothing. Let us be fair about that. 1 day is a phone call that happened before the story ran, which is not what happened in January 2020. But 1 day is also not a family working something out together over months. 1 day is a courtesy. It is not a consultation. And if you have ever been on the receiving end of a courtesy from someone you love, when what you wanted was a consultation, you know exactly how that lands. Let me set the ground now, because some of you will have followed every twist of this, and some of you will have quite sensibly had better things to do. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, is 41 years old. His wife Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, is 45. They have 2 children. Archie is 7. Lilibet is 5. They left Britain in 2020. They settled in Montecito, which is an extremely comfortable coastal enclave in Santa Barbara County, California, and they have lived there ever since, 6 years. In that time, Archie has gone from a baby to a boy about to start a new school. Lilibet has spent her entire life in America. She has never lived in the country her father was born in. I want you to sit with that for a second, because it is the part of this story I keep coming back to. There is a little girl who is 5 years old, named after her great-grandmother, who has never lived in Britain. And in September, she starts school there. Now, why does that matter more than all the palace politics? Because it is the one part of this decision that cannot be undone easily. You can rent a house and give it up. You can take a job and leave it. But when you enroll 2 children in British schools, as the Telegraph and the Sun both reported, and as the Associated Press has since covered, you have made a decision with a shape to it. school terms, friendships, accents that will start to change by Christmas. Children are the anchor that turns a visit into a move. And that is what separates this week from every other week in this 6-year story. Harry has come back to Britain many times, for a funeral, for a jubilee, for court appearances, for a coronation, briefly. He came back in July of this year, and I will come back to that visit, because it turns out to matter. But he has never brought the children back to stay. That is new. Everything else this week is noise around that one fact. Right. Let us build the week properly, day by day, and I am going to name the source for every single item, because I want you to be able to check me. Sunday, the 16th of August. King Charles is informed of the move. Source, a person familiar with the couple's plans, speaking to NBC News. Charles, at this point, is at Balmoral. That is the royal family's Scottish estate, and August at Balmoral is a fixed point in the royal calendar. It has been for well over a century. This is where the family goes to stop being an institution for a few weeks. Wednesday, the 19th of August, in the evening. The Telegraph and the Sun break the story. Both report that Archie and Lilibet have been enrolled in British schools to start in September. Thursday, the 20th of August. The story goes global. The Associated Press runs a full explainer and a relationship timeline. The BBC publishes a piece on what the return means for security arrangements. The Guardian runs an analysis piece under a phrase that I think is the sharpest thing written all week, describing the risk of rival courts inside one family. A spokesperson for the Sussexes declines to comment on the reasons for the move. And a source, again described as familiar with the couple's plans, tells NBC News something quite specific about the King's position. That Charles welcomes the chance to see more of the Sussex family privately, but that they remain private individuals and non-working members of the royal family. I want you to notice the shape of that sentence, because it is doing an enormous amount of work. It is warm, and it is closed at the same time. Come and see me. You are still not coming back to the job. Also on Thursday, People magazine reports that the Prince and Princess of Wales arrive at Balmoral with their children. Friday, the 21st of August. This is the day the story stops being about a house move and starts being about money. The Associated Press reports that Prince Harry and 6 other claimants must make an initial payment of around $13 million over their failed privacy case. The BBC puts the potential total at up to £34.5 million. Hello magazine reports the interim figure at £9.5 million, roughly a month after the original defeat. And the judge's assessment of the case, as reported by the BBC and the Daily Mail, was that it had been unreasonable to a high degree. That is a court speaking, not a commentator, not a source, a judge. Also on Friday, the BBC reports that Meghan is in talks for a role in the Netflix series The Gentleman. And the Express reports that senior members of the royal family were seen leaving Balmoral after gathering for a meeting about the Sussexes' move. Saturday and Sunday, the 22nd and 23rd. The Guardian reports that Meghan's casting has reportedly been withdrawn following a backlash in Britain. Note the hedging in that sentence. The Guardian hedged it, so I hedge it. Hello publishes the first photographs of King Charles at Balmoral since the news broke. The Daily Mail and People both cover the family attending a church service at Crathie Kirk, the small church near Balmoral where the royal family has worshipped for generations. Kate is photographed, smiling. William is there. The children are there. And the Express describes it, accurately I think, as a united front. That is your week, Sunday to Sunday. A private phone call, a leak, a global story, a court bill, a family meeting, and then a photograph of everyone in their Sunday best walking into a small Scottish church. If you wanted a single image for what the British monarchy actually is, you could do a lot worse than that last one. I promised you at the start that I would tell you where the guessing begins, and this is the moment in every program like this where most channels stop being honest. So let me do the opposite. Let me argue against my own framing for a few minutes. I opened this program by making a great deal of that one-day gap. Here are 3 good reasons why that might be far less damning than it sounds. First reason, one day may have been a leak, not a plan. We know the Telegraph and the Sun broke the story. We do not know how they got it. It is entirely possible that the Sussexes intended to tell the family properly, over weeks, and that a leak forced their hand. If that is what happened, then the one-day gap is not a snub at all. It is a couple scrambling. There is no reporting either way on this. I am telling you, it is possible, not that it is true. Second reason. There is a version where Charles already knew a great deal. The Telegraph reported that the matter was not discussed during the Sussexes' visit in July. That is a specific claim, and it is being read almost everywhere as evidence of secrecy. But read it again. It says the matter was not discussed. It does not say the king had no idea his son was unhappy in California. It does not say nothing was communicated in any other way, at any other time, by any other person. Fathers and sons often know things they have not discussed. Anyone over 50 watching this understands that better than any royal correspondent. Third reason, and this is the one I find most persuasive. Omid Scobie, who has written sympathetically about the couple for years, told the Daily Mail that the Sussexes planned this slowly and methodically, and that the clues were there all along. Now, you can take Scobie's view or leave it. He is not a neutral observer, and nobody pretends he is. But if he is even partly right, then the picture changes completely. Then, this was not a bolt from the blue at all. It was a long decision that finally became a phone call, and the world simply was not paying attention to the run-up. And here is the honest position, which is less exciting than certainty, but a good deal more useful. The Daily Mail's royal editor Rebecca English wrote this week that some people in royal circles who have dealt with the Sussexes fear there is more to this than they know. That is a very carefully written sentence by an experienced journalist, and what it actually means is this: the people closest to it do not understand it either. If they do not know, I certainly do not know, and neither does anybody making a video about it tonight. Let us talk about the practical questions now, because this is where the story goes from family drama to something that will end up on a government desk. First, the security question. If Prince Harry lives in Britain, who protects him? The BBC and the Daily Mail have both reported estimates of around £5 million a year. The Home Office previously rejected taxpayer-funded protection for the family, and this week, the Home Secretary Andy Burnham was asked about it directly, and according to The Guardian, described the funding of the Sussexes' security as a private matter. Hello magazine described the current situation, rather beautifully I thought, as a three-way silence. The palace is not saying. The government is not saying. The Sussexes are not saying. Here is why this is not a small technicality. Harry took the British government to court over his security. He lost. He has said, publicly and repeatedly, that he does not feel safe bringing his children to Britain without protection. That was the stated reason for years of absence. And now the children are enrolled in British schools. Something in that equation has changed, and nobody has explained what. The Daily Mail reported that a row over who pays continues, despite reports that a Home Office review has already been completed, which tells you, if nothing else, that this is being handled at a level where nobody wants their name on the decision. Then there is the money question, and I do not think most coverage has grasped how large this is. Up to £34.5 million, according to the BBC. An initial payment of around $13 million, according to the Associated Press. This is not a fine. These are costs awarded because a case failed. Meanwhile, the Daily Mail reports that the couple will not sell their Montecito mansion, valued at $14.7 million, which carries upkeep of around $650,000 a year. Now here is my reading, and I am flagging clearly that this is my reading and not a reported fact. You do not keep a house you are not living in unless you are keeping your options open. The Daily Mail quoted a source suggesting the couple may only stay a year in Britain before considering a move to Canada or Australia. Take that with the caution any single anonymous source deserves. But the unsold house in California is not a rumor. It is a decision, and decisions tell you more than statements do. And then there is the third question, which nobody is asking loudly enough. Where will they actually live? Not Windsor. Not Kensington. The Daily Mail reported that the Sussexes already have a house lined up, and that it is not a royal residence. There was, apparently, another option. The Daily Mail reported that Earl Spencer, Diana's brother, Harry's uncle, was willing to offer Harry a home on the Althorp estate, 13,000 acres in Northamptonshire, the place where Harry's mother is buried. And according to that reporting, Harry had other plans. I find that detail almost unbearably sad, and I want to be careful about why, because it would be very easy to turn it into an accusation, and it is not one. We have no idea what was discussed between those two men, or what reasons Harry had, and there are 100 perfectly good reasons a 41-year-old man might not want to live on his uncle's estate. But there is something in a man coming home to a country and choosing not to come home to the one piece of ground in it that holds his mother. I want to spend a few minutes now on the questions that have no answers, because I think this is the most useful thing I can do for you tonight. Every other program about this week will fill these gaps with invention. Reconstructed conversations. Imagined confrontations. Somebody storming out of a room at Balmoral. I am going to leave the gaps open and tell you why each one matters. We do not know what Charles said on that Sunday call. We know it happened. We know when. That is all. Anyone who tells you the words is making them up. We do not know what was decided at Balmoral. The Express reported that senior royals gathered and were then seen leaving. That is a photograph and a fact. What was said inside that room is completely unknown, and it will probably stay unknown for 30 years until somebody's papers are released. The Daily Mail reported that the Welses have no interest in engaging with Harry and Meghan. That is one newspaper, sourced the way that newspapers source these things. Set against it, 2 days later, William, Kate, and their children walked into a church at Balmoral with the rest of the family and were photographed doing it. Both of those things are in the public record. They do not fit together neatly. I am not going to pretend they do. We do not know why now. This is the real one. This is the question underneath everything. Why, after 6 years, this August? The Daily Mail floated one theory, that an acting role appeared for Meghan and the stars aligned. And then, within days, The Guardian reported that role had reportedly been withdrawn. So if that was the reason has already evaporated. There are other possible reasons, and I am going to list them as possibilities and nothing more. Money, given the scale of that court bill. Career, given that the American projects have not landed as hoped, and the BBC ran a piece this week openly asking what happened to their American dream. Loneliness, given that the Daily Mail reported Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland, is staying in Los Angeles, which means the children will be a very long way from their maternal grandmother, or something none of us has thought of. And then there is the reason nobody in the British press will state plainly, so I will state it as a question rather than a claim. King Charles is 77 years old. He has been treated for cancer, which he confirmed himself publicly. Town and Country ran a piece this week explicitly raising the question of whether the king's health is part of the context for this move. I am not going to speculate about that man's health. It is not mine to speculate about. And there is a particular cruelty in strangers on the internet discussing a cancer patient's prognosis as entertainment. But I will say this much, because it is true of every family, and not just this one. There comes a point where the arithmetic of time changes, where the question stops being whether you are right and becomes whether you have left it too late. Most of you watching know precisely what I mean. Some of you got there in time. Some of you did not, and you think about it more than you say. If that is any part of what is happening here, then it is the least newsworthy and the most human explanation available. And it would be the one thing in this entire story that every single person watching would understand immediately. So where does this go? 3 things to watch, and I will keep them concrete. 1. September. The children start school. Once that happens, this stops being reversible on a whim. Watch whether the school is named publicly, and watch how hard the couple fight to keep it private, because that will tell you a great deal about what kind of life they are actually planning. 2. The security decision. Somebody has to pay. The Guardian reported the Home Secretary calling it a private matter, and that position is not going to survive the first security incident. Watch for a quiet announcement, probably on a Friday, probably worded so that nobody has to admit anything. 3. Harry and William. The Associated Press ran a piece this week asking whether that relationship can be rebuilt. The BBC ran a similar one. Both concluded, in the polite language these organizations use, that nobody knows. I will offer you one observation, and it is an observation and not a prediction. Brothers who have not spoken properly in years do not reconcile because of a press release. They reconcile because they end up in the same room by accident, usually at a funeral or a hospital or a christening, and one of them says something ordinary about the weather, and it turns out that was the whole obstacle. The royal calendar puts these two men in the same room several times a year. Now they will be in the same country. That is not reconciliation, but it is proximity, and proximity is the raw material. Let me leave you with the thing I keep turning over. 6 years ago, a man left his country and said, in effect, that he could not be who he was inside that family. This week, that man enrolled his children in schools in that same country, 3 miles or 30 miles from the institution he left. Something in him changed, or something in his circumstances did, and we may never be told which. But he called his father first, one day early, when he might have called nobody at all. I have been doing this long enough to know how easy it would be to end this program with a verdict. To tell you Harry is coming home in defeat, or Harry is coming home in triumph, or that the palace has won, or that the Sussexes have won. I am not going to do that, because the honest answer is that a 77-year-old man got a phone call from his son on a Sunday in August, and none of us know what either of them was feeling when they hung up. I would rather tell you the truth and leave you with a question than tell you a story and leave you with an answer I invented. So here is my question for you, and I read these. If you had a child who left and came back 6 years later and told you one day before they told everyone else, what would you feel first? Relief? Or the sting of being told last? I think most of us would feel both at once, and I think we would not admit to the second one. Tell me below. I read every one of them, and the answers to this sort of question are usually a good deal wiser than anything I have said tonight. If this was useful to you, subscribe. Everything on this channel is sourced, and when I do not know something, I will tell you I do not know it. That is the whole promise, and it is a rarer one than it should be. I am Richard. Thank you for your company. Look after each other.